Okay, welcome back everybody. This is now the Q&A session of Fram's Capital Markets Day, and we're very happy for all the questions we have received, and we will do them in a little bit of a dialogue format here between me and Max, and we will go through them one by one. So Max, I think you have the questions here in the note.
Thank you, Christopher, and welcome. Yes, we received a lot of questions, very interesting ones. I will start with one. It's more on the macro in the region and also in Vietnam. How does that affect our business, and how do you see the market turmoil and the trade wars affecting our business?
I think this is a topic on everybody's mind right now. We hear about the global trade war between the US and China, and of course Vietnam is close in geography to China, and the supply chains are connected. So definitely there is an impact. I think Vietnam on the one hand has a unique position in that it's actually also positively affected by these trade barriers, because when global manufacturers see that they can no longer manufacture in China, they move orders into countries close to China that can manufacture. And one of the primary recipients of these orders is Vietnam. First the orders come, and then the manufacturing footprint is also step by step moved into Vietnam. And this we're seeing clearly. So of course this is not directly affecting the ventures of Fram, because that's more in the digital industries in Vietnam and in the region. But on the other hand, it's a positive effect now in the short term on the Vietnamese economy. So actually what's happening, if we look on the ground the last quarter or so, we see that the government of Vietnam has actually revised the forecast for the GDP target for Vietnam. It used to be 6.7, but now it's even above 7 for 2018. So they're clearly gonna beat it, they feel. And also we see the PMI, so the kind of the main confidence indicator of the Vietnamese industry, has jumped up to an all-time, oh no, sorry, not all-time high, but the highest point since 2011, which is a clear indicator of the manufacturing moving in from China into Vietnam. And that then has positive follow-on effects on the Vietnamese economy, also impacting the digital industries. So overall, the macro backdrop is positive, but even strengthened short term by this inflow of manufacturing orders into Vietnam.
All right, another question we received is, how does Smartbuy make money now?
Smartbuy has the fortunate position of several revenue streams, and some of the revenues come through that we are selling the products of our insurance partners primarily, so that's kind of a commission on transaction. Some of the revenues will come on so-called leads generation, so we will generate clients that are likely to want to buy insurance products or private savings products online from our partners, and then they will pay a certain fee for that lead that we generate for them. Most of that is generated online. It can be for insurance products, but it can also be for private savings products or credit products like credit cards primarily.
Very good. On that topic also, how does Nordic Coder make money?
Nordic Coder, I think, if we take two primary buckets, the big buckets is really the tuition fee. So students pay for Nordic Coders courses, or engineers pay for these courses. And then the other big bucket is the recruitment fees that we generate from helping our partners recruit engineers that have gone through the courses of Nordic Coder. I think there's a little bit of confusion sometimes on Nordic Coder. People perceive it to be more offline than it actually is. So these tuition fees are generated both offline and online. So it's a mix. Sometimes it's a pure online course. Sometimes it's a mix of an online content and an offline content. So it's not only offline payment for those.
Thank you. Here's another question, more from the AGM we had in May. What is the current status of the option pool we distributed to the employees?
Yes, we have a decision from the annual general shareholder meeting of an employee options program of around 43,000 options distributed across the ranks of the Fram group, really to serve as a long-term incentive program for employees and tech talent throughout the organization.
We also have a question here on the SME lending venture, the one that goes under the working name Credito. How do we plan to finance it, and how do we see the regulatory environment?
It's always, in a credit venture, it's always easier to get started in a partnership with a current credit institution of some kind. The most obvious choice is to go with a bank, so that in terms of regulatory, they can provide the license to providing credit or to broker credit in one way or the other, typically online in our case. That also goes for the financing. So it's easier to get started with financing with the credit institution or another financial player of some kind. Over time, that model can change when you know more about your client, your target client group, and the type of business that you're building. You can move into these other parts, so the financing directly and so on. But that's how we're starting this venture.
Very good. Another question we have here is that, naturally we have most of our ventures in Vietnam, but what other geographies do you see us opening up in?
We have, of course, some in Sri Lanka already, and it's the broader Southeast Asia region that we're working in. And I think it's always a fascinating aspect of the countries in this region, around 700 million people in this region. And the countries in the region have very different level of development, but they're all kind of staggered step by step, so to speak. So if we look at the least developed country in this region, it's probably Myanmar. And then you have a couple of small countries that are maybe not so interesting for our potential venture entries. That would be Cambodia and Laos. They're simply too small. And then you have Vietnam comes after that in level of development. And then we have Philippines, and then we have Indonesia, and then we have Thailand, and then we have Malaysia, and then we have Singapore. They all have very different level of development and GDP per capita and spending power, and sometimes also very different level of digital infrastructure. That can be payments, that could be adoption of a digital behavior, and so on. So sometimes when we sit in the investment committee and we have different models we're evaluating for entry, we can see that maybe the model doesn't fit so well for Vietnam because maybe the payment infrastructure is not developed enough. But it could fit better in Malaysia, for example, which is a few steps ahead or even a decade or more ahead in development. So there are a few interesting countries we could consider for potential entry.
Then a question regarding M&A. So we've done several M&A deals the past 12 months. And the question here is that purely opportunistic, or is that part of some sort of M&A strategy?
M&A is a natural part of the strategy, and I think there are really two buckets for M&A for Fram. One is this restart of venture M&A that we have done so far, which is actually very close to start from scratch that we do in the venture builder. So instead of starting completely with a blank sheet, we buy a company that maybe has had a successful rollout of a brand, so it's well known in the market. There's been a lot of investments into the brand, but we can buy it at a relatively cheap purchase price because the evolution of the financials or the revenue growth has not been that good over a period of time. So the previous owners might be considering to shut it down, like in the Carmody case, or they might be considering to exit, like in the dual case with IDG. And then we can come in, we can leverage the investments that have been done in marketing and in brand, and we can continue to build from there. So that's perhaps an even better starting point for a venture builder than to start from scratch. Then we have the second bucket of M&A, where we can go into a more mature business which already generates revenues and cash flow, and we can do some sort of transformation with that operation or that business. That could be a digital transformation, that could be a geographical transformation, so perhaps help an acquired business to come into Southeast Asia, or even to go into Northern Europe or Scandinavia. And we can also help them to inject stronger engineers and stronger IT talent, perhaps even cheaper IT talent from Vietnam. So that's the second bucket of M&A, where we have not done so much to date, but where we hope to do more in the future.
We also have a question here regarding future financing. How do you see Fram Group's need for future financing?
I think there are two potential kind of triggers for capital increase for Fram. So far, the current venture portfolio is developing according to plan or even above expectation. And that financing that we raised in the IPO plus the private placement in early 2018 was for the first 24 months of operation of the first batch of ventures, so the 10 to 15 ventures. That's progressing according to plan. There's no unforeseen capital need in those ventures, and that money should really last for the first 24 months of those ventures' evolution. But on top of that, we can come back to the M&A that we discussed. If we go into larger M&A and kind of more cash flow generating M&A, there's a potential trigger. And then the other trigger is when these ventures come into kind of their second phase, hopefully most of them have already reached a plateau of break-even, still growing, but reaching and showing break-even. But then you might take a decision that you want to empower further growth to help this venture grow fast from that or within that second phase. So after the first 24 months. So that's the potential other trigger. But both of them would only be for accelerating the growth of Fram Group, and it would be really an expansive trigger of some kind. And then we have a few operational questions, a few on the venture builder, but also on the general prospects for next year. So I'll ask you then, Max, a few of these questions. The first one is which venture you see the strongest traction so far?
I get that question a lot. We actually see very good traction across all ventures. They're all performing according to the plan. If I have to single out one venture that is performing way above expectations, both in an absolute sense and also in a relative sense, it will be Carmody, Vietnam. But that's also for the natural reason it was the first venture to come out of the portfolio almost more than a year ago. But the one with the greatest sort of absolute revenue right now would be Carmody, Vietnam.
Mm. How difficult do you think it is to find founders for the ventures?
It's a good question, and I get that question a lot actually. It's a yes and no question. On the one hand, we get a lot of applicants from various backgrounds, from all corners of the world, and that we are humble and very grateful for, that we have in such a short time built so much interest in this group of companies. That said, the skills and the characteristics it takes to actually build something from scratch in such a high-stress environment, they're quite rare to find, I must say. It's perseverance, it's frugality, it's not taking no for an answer, and a real winner mind, I would say.
But still a lot of interest.
A lot, and keep sending.
So what do you perceive as the biggest challenges for 2019?
I don't see anything out of the ordinary. It's the sort of the daily struggles and the daily challenges we have in all these all the ventures we're initiating. I mean, we're quite well positioned, not only in the heart of Southeast Asia with a massive population growing very fast, and if we look at the portfolio, we're in, you know, real estate, automotives, education, finance, insurance. So, I mean, of course, all these industries have challenges, but more on the operationals, I would not say anything adversely out macro-wise. I think the challenge is more inside sort of the house, you know, like keep empowering, keep coaching, keep supporting our founders, and keeping the motivation high.
Okay, then we're looking forward to a fantastic 2019. And thank you very much for sending all of these questions, and keep sending them. We will, of course, answer all investor questions we get. And then we hope to be able to come back in a similar format regularly as we progress into 2019. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.